Hi, welcome to the Curious Midlife podcast, the show that brings you conversations for the multi-passionate Renaissance woman. I'm here to inspire you to create a new sense of self by daring to be creative in everything you do, and to see the world as a playground to move, explore, discover, and enjoy at any age. I help busy midlife women reclaim and increase their physical strength and confidence. Get your mojo back so you can feel brave and adventurous again and age with grace. I'm your host, Dr. Julie Angel, movement coach, filmmaker, eternal student, author of the book Breaking the Jump, and creator of the MAP system. Stay curious, creative, and strong. Enjoy the show. Welcome to this week's podcast, and I have the amazing, the beautiful, the eloquent, the wise, I'm such a fangirl, Courtney Townley from the Grace and Grit podcast. So welcome to our welcome, Courtney. And we're both like sitting here smiling. You can't see that. You can maybe hear it. But so welcome. Thank you for giving me your time today. And tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and how you got there.
Well, first of all, let me say that anytime I get the opportunity to be in your presence, I will take it. I think you're such a bright light. And I've had you on my show multiple times, and I feel exactly the same way about you. So thank you for letting me come here and spend time with you. So my name's Courtney Townley, and I am, what can I tell you? I live in the great state of Montana, which I just love so much, especially this time of year. This is being recorded in August. I'm the mother of a 12-year-old boy. And I have an amazing partner, and I run a business, which I have had my business now for, I've been self-employed for over 20 years, and it's kind of evolved into different things. And it's always been around women's health. So for a long time, I was very rooted in teaching movement. I evolved into expanding that into nutrition. That expanded even further into helping women manage their brains around all the behavior change. And today, I'm really most passionate about tying it all together, because I really believe all of that is a part of a woman making the most out of the second half of her life. So I feel like I help women through the rumbles of midlife. I help them to honor their own self-care, not as an obsession, but as a gateway to the rest of their life. Because let's face it, right? If we're exhausted and tired and depleted and reactive, we're not going to do the work that we're really here to do.
Completely. And it's that irony that it takes energy to do things differently and create change. And the change you want is more energy, but you need to find energy to do things differently. And
absolutely.
And we're on the same page in terms that like nothing exists in isolation. So there's the people who are like, yeah, but I'm all about movement. I'm all about nutrition. I'm all about mindset. And you're like, well, how's that working out?
Well, and Julie, I was that person, right? I mean, I feel like for a lot of my career, I was just young and naive, and I didn't really know the magnitude of the conversation or the magnitude of all the pieces that played a role in the health equation and just the life fulfillment equation. So I was very isolated into the movement conversation for a long time. And then it evolved into fat loss, right? I specialized in fat loss for almost a decade. And then I really started to see the error of so many of my ways in that people were getting results, but they weren't really changing their mindset around who they were and what was possible for their life. And I don't know that I would have learned that lesson any other way. Like that was just my path, that I almost had to do things wrong in order to learn that, oh, there's actually a better way here. So I completely empathize with all those people who are still stuck in this conversation that it's all about movement or it's all about nutrition or whatever the thing is you want to make it about. We can both promise you it's about so much more than that.
Definitely. And the idea that wrong is wrong isn't always actually what is correct, because wrong can lead to really right. And this idea of we have to get things right and we have to be good at it and it has to come easily. And I remember someone said to me once, and I found it to be one of the most offensive things anyone had ever said to me was that, well, that came really easily to you. And I was like, oh, Oh my gosh, you have no idea.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I love that you bring that up. It's so I run a membership program that is called Rumble and Rise. And the reason I picked that name is because exactly for this reason, there's so much value in the rumble. And yet, what do we avoid? We try to avoid getting uncomfortable. We don't want to get uncomfortable. We want to avoid making mistakes. We want to avoid being wrong, whoever's defining that, right? And the truth is, like, that's where all the learning happens. It's where all the growth happens. I mean, how many times, like in parkour or any kind of movement skill set, did you mess it up in order to finally get it somewhat right one time?
Completely. And now I've gone to the other extreme where if I try something, and especially if it's something new, and it's a complete just like, oh my God, I can't do that. I think, 15 years ago, I could have had that inner critic to be like, well, that's because I'm a bit rubbish. That's because I'm weak. That's because I'm blah, 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 blah. And now I'm like, oh, cool. Treasure map. Because
Treasure
it's
map.
like, oh, but well, because there is this interconnection, then it's like, well, if I can improve a little bit on this, that's going to domino and feed into everything else. So it's all this interconnectedness. So there's another member of your family that you didn't mention who,
Oh, I did not. Yes. And normally I do. He's like the front and center of all my bios. But yes, my 3-year-old Great Dane, Sully, he's 200 pounds and he is blind. So he doesn't have eyes. And he has probably been one of my greatest teachers in my life, in that he was such an incredible example that when he started having issues with his eyes about 2 years ago, so he was barely 2, so he was coming up on his second birthday, and you could tell he was really struggling to open his eyes. And long and short of it, we struggled with this for 6 weeks. He got glaucoma very quickly, which is pressure building in your eye. And he basically detached the retina of his eyes because the pressure was so intense. So he was blind. And then the pressure was still there. So we worked with an ophthalmologist who basically said, we need to take his eyes out. And I had all kinds of stories about that, Julie. Oh man, did I have stories, right? That I was going to have this blind bull living in my house that was going to be miserable and depressed. And we were going to have to basically navigate his path everywhere. All I saw were problems with this new reality. And Sully, in Sully fashion, comes out of the surgery center after having his eyes removed, wagging his tail, and jumped right into the truck to go home. And his life has been that way ever since.
and I remember, I mean, so I was following you and you were sharing the stories of Sully. And Sully is like, yeah, this, gorgeous, vital, like full of vitality and, shiny
Yes.
coat and waggy tail. He is like the happy, there's nothing but positivity in the present moment, kind of the best of dogs kind of being.
Yeah.
And so I was following you on social media, and there were times when you would, kind of reference Sully. And I remember you saying that there were a whole bunch of kind of things that went on at the same time. I think the roof came off your house, the family had COVID, and then there was the decision of what to do and the sadness of the
Yeah.
diagnosis.
Yeah.
And I remember,
And it was all at Christmas.
great.
So making this a beautiful time for my son. At the time, he was 10 years old. I mean,
Great. Don't
it
you
was
love
a
it when life
disaster.
just rains crap every now and again? It's
Yeah.
like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, bring it on, bring it on, bring it on. What next? What next? But you said that was one of the hardest decisions of what to do.
It really was, because I had no perspective. I had never been around a blind person or a blind animal. And my father was a veterinarian. I mean, I grew up around animals, but I had never had the experience of being the parent or being the owner of a blind animal. And so, of course, my brain goes to where the human brain loves to go, which is the tragedy side, right? I heard a TED talk once. I can't remember who it was, but he said the negative to the human brain is like Velcro.
Oh, that's good.
where the positive is like Teflon. Like it comes and we let it slide off so easily. But the negative, we're all in with that.
I
So
mean, yeah, it kept us
from
safe primarily, primarily.
exactly. It comes from a beautiful place. And, in a lot of ways now it just doesn't serve us so well. So anyway, my brain goes to that place of all the reasons why this is going to be a problem. And my canine ophthalmologist, which I didn't even realize at the time this was a profession. Who knew, right? But this man was born to be a canine ophthalmologist. He is so gifted at his job. And he became my counselor every night. Around 8:00, he would call me to check in on Sully over the course of probably 3 weeks because we were trying to see how we could resolve this. And I remember in one conversation I was having with him, he said to me, Courtney, you have this very developed prefrontal cortex that is creating all these like Oscar nominated scripts about the story that is going to play out when he has his eyes removed. And he said, I want you to know that Sully does not have those stories. These are your stories, not his. And he said, look, it might be true that Sully comes out of surgery and has a couple rough days of just being disoriented and a little bit sad or depressed, but he'll come around. But we never saw any of that. All we saw was Sully say, I don't have eyes. Let's move on.
That's so amazing.
Right? Let's figure this out.
So amazing.
Amazing.
What I see with Pax is it's just like neuroplasticity in real time.
Mm-hmm.
And, this idea of, you can't train an old dog new tricks. You can train a dog anything at any point and any time if you've got a really high treat reward. But for anyone listening, so basically I was following your stories and then kind of saw you go through this. And then it was quiet. And then there was a video you shared, and it's of this big, beautiful, majestic Sully romping around a field. He's coming
in the snow.
He's coming to you when you call him. And obviously, this is a 200-pound animal. You're in Montana. You have space, which is good for anybody and anything. And I was training a client at the time, and this is all like in the depths of COVID as well. And I'm a dog lover, and this client was a dog lover. And I said, like, I'm following this friend of mine. And I got halfway through explaining Sully's situation. And he immediately said, like, oh, such a shame I'll have to put the poor animal down. And I was like, no, you are so wrong. You are so wrong.
Yeah.
In the video. And it lit him up. It lifted his heart. It lifted his spirit. And just to see this continued life that your family has with Sully and what he brings. I just talk about Sully and I'm smiling. It's just like, so he is. I mean, dog is God spelled backwards. They are our teachers. They are our guides.
Oh yeah.
So how does that continue to be for you, and how is that fed into what you do as an analogy of everything?
Well, it's interesting. My husband and I this weekend, we take these road trips on the weekend because, again, we live in Montana. So we drive to rivers and mountains and we just hang out for the day. And this weekend we drove to a river and we found a place on the river to have a picnic. And out in the middle of the river, which the rivers here are pretty, they're significant. They're wide. We were in a pretty calm area, but it was still pretty deep. And there was this big flat rock in the middle of the river. And I said, I'm gonna go out there. And well, of course, I started to go, and Sully has to go with me. I mean, he has no fear. Sometimes it's terrifying. I wish he had more fear. But he just tromped right behind me. We get to the rock, and I kind of had to climb up on the rock, and he just jumps right up there. And anyway, at the end of the day, my husband is petting Sully, and he looked at me and he said, man, we so underestimated this dog. And I think this is exactly what women do, especially in midlife. I think that, you and I, we have had these conversations around, midlife being such an opportunity for renovation. And one of the conversations I'm so passionate about is that I work with a lot of women who get to midlife and they're very agitated. They're very uncomfortable for a myriad of reasons. It could be their lack of self-care. That's usually part of it. But it's also the unwillingness to make some strong decisions in areas of their life that are no longer serving them. Maybe that's a relationship. Maybe it's a job. Maybe it could be anything. And when we start like kind of looking under the rug of what's really going on, often one of the first responses a woman will say is, "This is just who I am."
Mm-hmm.
And I always think, oh, no. This is just who you've practiced being.
Mm-hmm.
That's all. Your identity is simply your practices. And so for the last 10, 20, maybe 30 years, maybe 40 years, you have practiced a certain way of being. And you get to change those practices at any time. It's like the best news ever. And it can be a hard pill to swallow because a lot of women think, well, gosh, it took me 40, 50 years to get here. Is it going to take me that long to change? And I think one of the biggest igniters of change, like what will determine how long your process is the mindset with which you try to tackle the change.
I love
right?
that.
If you are belittling yourself and berating yourself with self-doubt and all the reasons why you can't, and you have the mean girl on your shoulder and you're giving her the microphone, it's going to take you a really long time if you ever even get there. But if you can look at this as such an opportunity and be really curious about who you might want to be at this stage of life, and look for all the evidence as to why this is possible for you, rather than looking for all the evidence why it's not possible for you.
Which we're very good at.
Yeah, we are so good at that. We're going to make progress a lot quicker, right? And the other thing I think we forget too is the energy that we use to create change in our life is the same energy we are going to use to try to sustain that change. So if you are miserable along the path, if Sully every day was like, oh, here we go again. I've got no eyes. I can't see a darn thing. I live in this, wilderness. I mean, he would never get to where he is. But he just didn't let any of that come in partly because he doesn't have that brain design, right? His brain was perfectly designed for this, where he just is in survival mode. I have to use what works. And he looks for resources. And it's interesting when we go to the park, he'll attach himself to other dogs because he'll just follow them, right? Or he'll follow us, or he'll listen for certain sounds, or he knows our smells. So he uses what's available to him to create change versus focusing on the fact that he doesn't have eyes and just not getting out of bed in the morning.
I mean, completely. And it's such an astute observation of how we can work to the strengths we have. So, and what I love about this is going to end up being a whole episode about dogs. Dogs are the metaphor for midlife.
If you're not a dog lover, you may not. Yeah.
Like, okay, these dog ladies. So, for example, the like Pax will always go to the most comfortable, warmest place on the sofa. Why would he not? Why would he choose to not be able to meet his needs? Because he has no story that says that's a bad thing. There's no bad story that says, oh, the part of the sofa with the little fluffy blanket on, we should leave that just in case anyone else comes in. It's like, no.
Right, because we don't want to make anyone else uncomfortable.
God forbid.
God forbid.
How very dare you? It's so, what I love with when we're around animals, there's just an honesty. Like, they keep you honest because they're honest, and they're not hung up or addicted to a story of identity, which is what I see a lot of people I know kind of stay stuck. And these are also people who are not lacking knowledge in what to do. So I'm around a lot of other coaches, and some of those coaches, when you speak to them, they will just bring up the same thing, that like the traumatic event, the thing that happened again and again and again, and you realize like, okay, you're stuck in that loop.
Mhm.
And while at the same time, the events that get us to doing what we're doing, I mean, they always say to people who are coaches, well, you're just kind of like, maybe 1 year or 5 years just ahead of where your students are at, because we're all just like, there's a quest for knowledge. There's
Always.
for me, like, positive aging is just an opportunity for more research. What works, what doesn't, what do I like? How can I change with the changes? And what do I like now, even though I never used to like it? But there's a moment of kind of radical responsibility and honesty, and you guide people so beautifully through that. In the
Mhm.
trainings I've done with you and your offers, you really, this ability to have that self reflection and giving a space for compassion um, around that is just it's really truly a gift. When I've been on your trainings, it's really wonderful.
Thank you. Well, it's interesting. I think that we often, because you spoke to so many great things there, I think a lot of what shapes us as humans, unfortunately, is trauma and culture. And animals definitely can go through trauma, but animals are also much better at dealing with their trauma in the aftermath, right? They shake it off. They have things that they do to nurture their nervous system, where humans, we're not so good at that. It's like a lost art. We kind of got away from that. And then, of course, we're living in a culture where it's like more is always better and you should be this way. And if you care about your health, you should do these things. And I think I know for me, when someone tells me how I should live my life, my inner toddler comes out full force and she's like, oh no. Like hands across the chest, I'm going to dig my heels in the sand and be like, nope, I'm not going.
Same, even you saying it, I'm like, my posture change, like
Right?
it gets my neck up, my back. Like if
Yeah.
I'm like, ooh, excuse me, no, blah, 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 blah. Who's in charge here?
Yeah.
Like,
And the thing that I think I know you do this as well. The thing that I'm always bringing clients back to is that you know what nurtures you. You know what makes you feel at peace. You know what helps you to settle your nervous system. If you start paying attention, if you may not know listening to this right now, but if you start going in a little bit and just asking some good questions and starting to notice your inner landscape, that stuff gets revealed to you pretty quickly. But then we convince ourselves that someone else knows better than we do. So, my objective in my work is not to define for a woman what her health journey should look like. It's encouraging her to get to know herself better so she can design that roadmap.
absolutely. I mean,
Because I also know it's the only way she'll ever sustain it. Because I'm not going to work with a coach the rest of my life. I've worked with so many coaches. I love coaching. I'm such a fan of coaching. And I will probably always work with a coach to some degree, depending on where I'm rumbling in my own life. But I'm not going to work with the same coach the rest of my life. So I always tell my students that I'll be your coach until you're ready to take the role over,
yeah,
because this is really your work.
yeah.
And I'm just here to kind of be your Sherpa until you're ready to take that over.
Oh yeah, we're just guides. We're just
Just
guides,
guides.
just a guide.
Absolutely.
And I always say to people like, you're in the driving seat. And I can't do anything for you either.
Right.
At some point, the decision, it becomes not about knowledge. And it's these other two elements that I know that we're both very passionate about. And this is just the support and accountability, which are the game changers. Yet most people are still hung up on knowledge, and it plays a role because you need to know the right thing. But there's a lot of knowledge, and a lot of that may not be relevant. It may not be helpful, and most of the time it's just not appropriate.
And I think it's a way of hiding. I think consuming information and being in this perpetual space of more information, it's just a way of not doing. It's like you're rationalizing not taking action yet because there's one more thing I need to figure out. No, you don't. No, you don't.
Yeah, this integration versus information, and
Yes.
is something that I see, and I mean, learning's great. Learning's a buzz. Learning, it feels good. And then we get a little like pat on the back, like, oh, well done, clever girl. Like, oh, yes, 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 you're learning more and you're doing really well. And you're really investing time in yourself. And then it's
Yeah.
like, oh, implementation, integration, practice. Nope, gonna go and read another book.
Right. Or listen to another podcast or whatever the thing may be. Right.
Yes, yes, yes. So tell me, how has all of your coaching and training, in the way that it's evolved, how have you seen that integrate for you into your everyday life as a midlife woman?
Yeah. So I think, first of all, I think it's very hard to be a coach and not let your own personal journey sort of inform the process or at least play some small role, right? I mean, my work is an extension of me.
Sure.
It just is. And I think I did what a lot of women do, which is we make the body the problem to be solved, and the body's never been the problem. Your body is freaking brilliant, and it is operating off the messaging that you are giving it. And so, bodies aren't perfect. Sure, messages kind of sometimes get, twisted and misunderstood and things can happen, but the body itself is not really the problem. And I took that to a whole nother level because I made a profession out of thinking the body was a problem, right? We just lose weight. We just get more fit. We build more muscle. We do all the things,
Everyone's
right?
supposed to be happy. That makes you happy.
Yeah.
That's the happiness. Yeah.
And two things happened in my career that I think were huge turning points, and they happened around the same time. So when I was in my early 30s, I had had a training studio for many years. I had a lot of women midlife coming in who wanted to get more fit. What they really wanted was to feel better. And getting fit in their brain was a pathway to doing that. And you and I would both agree that yes, movement can absolutely make you feel better. And it wasn't the sole solution. These women were coming in and, when you work intimately with a client, you start to learn a lot more about their lives. And I was hearing things about, again, like we talked about earlier, careers that they had been in that they had fallen out of love with years ago. Really difficult relationships, tons of self-doubt, or just not having any belief in themselves as people and what they could possibly create for their life. And so while I love teaching movement, because I've always been a really avid mover, it's a huge passion of mine, I also realized that maybe this wasn't the real problem, right? Maybe there was more to this. So it was integration, and I was not at all in a space education-wise to take that on. I just I wasn't educated enough. The second thing that happened around the same time that I was having this awareness that, okay, there's more to this story, is I had just had my son. And I was struggling like you wouldn't believe. Like I had a beautiful birth, but a very difficult afterbirth. Like I basically hemorrhaged. I had to have a blood transfusion. But, I just thought 2 weeks later, I could just bounce back into training at 5:00 in the morning with my students, right? No problem. So I completely underestimated what my body needed from me. I was dictating to my body, this is what I expect you to do, rather than this is what my body needs from me.
Mm-hmm.
I just had an agenda for my body.
Mm-hmm.
And I lost a lot of weight very quickly because I went through a very traumatic medical process. And the only thing that people said to me in the aftermath of having my son was how great I looked.
I was about to
how
say,
awesome my body was, and how
great.
Yeah. And here I was, like, I would happily take on an extra 30, 50 pounds if I could be in a mentally more stable place, because that's how much I was struggling. And so that kind of got me thinking too, like, okay, there is more to this health conversation than, pretty muscle and fitting into the clothes I was pre-baby. Like that is not what health is. So at that point, I really started to change the conversation in my business. My whole business model started to shift. I started to expand. This was my whole objective in starting the Grace and Grit podcast, which was to expand the conversation of what women were even talking about when we talked about health. Yes, diet and exercise are a small piece of that, but there are a lot of other considerations. There's a lot of other things that feed the stress bucket. And what we're talking about with health is the stress bucket.
Yeah.
And stress comes in so many forms, and how we think about ourselves and how we think about our lives is one of those stressors. So all to say, I had to get more education. I had to go through a lot of my own learning and application and develop my own practices. And as I started to do that and see the healing that was happening in my own life, it's one of those things that it's like, once you open the box, you can't close it.
You can't unknow it. Yeah. You're just
right?
like, oh shit, that's really inconvenient. That's really timely. But it's there.
So I started to share some of what I was learning and what I had been practicing with my clients and my students, and of course they started reaping benefits as well. And it just felt for me like I was finally having a more integritous conversation. Like for me, because I knew for a while it wasn't just about diet and exercise, but I wasn't really sure what else it was.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so once, and I'm not there, by the way, there's no arrival here.
Oh, no.
There's no destination to reach. I'm going to be a lifelong student. But I started to see a much bigger picture and really started to encourage my students to look at it through a much broader lens. And it just brought in so much more compassion and so much more agency, like people being able to decide for themselves the journey they want to take. You know, I have a certain level of self-care because, yes, I want to be healthy for as long as possible, but also in dedication to my movement practice. My movement is very important to me. And if I am carrying a lot of extra weight, or if my joints hurt when I go into training, my training suffers, my movement suffers. And I can't, one of my biggest fears is that there will come a day where I can't go out dancing. I love dancing.
Mm-hmm.
Love it. And that is like one of the things that if you took it away from me, it would just feel like such a loss. And so I feel like self-care for me is dedication to those things, to my family, to my movement, to what I'm here to cause and contribute with my business. And it makes it so much more exciting and fun than if I'm trying to fit in the clothes I wore pre-baby, which I don't even fit in those, by the way. And I could care less.
And in terms of energy,
yeah,
where were the shifts that you saw when you started to expand this view?
Yeah, I think it was my energy shifted. First of all, my energy just expanded, right? I always say health is an exercise of expansion, not shrinking. And I don't necessarily mean physically, but sometimes it is physically expanding, right? For some people. But I think more of just knowing in my bones that whatever I truly want for my life, I can create. I'm not holding myself back because I don't believe in myself or because I don't feel that I have the strength or the ability to pick myself up if I screw it up. And I know I'm going to screw it up because I screw up every day, I mean, and being an online business owner, we don't just fail, we fail on a public forum.
It's an interesting one.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm always saying it's like the best personal growth, personal development education you could ever get is being an online business because you have to fail publicly. And it's been really good for me in that way because 10 years ago, I would have taken everything as an affront, right? I would have taken everything as truth. Anytime someone left a bad review or critiqued me in some way, I would have owned that. Like it was just a part of who I was. And now it's just like, you have the right to your opinion and I'm moving on.
Yeah.
So I think it allowed me I think forgiving myself became a big part of that journey. I think forgiving other people and just not owning other people's stuff, right? Like that's not my work, that's yours. Living my life in a way that I feel at peace with who I am, because I know that that's going to benefit everybody I encounter. My kid, my husband, my friends, my family, my clients. if I don't like myself, it's going to affect everybody.
Yeah. And I think
So
that,
at times, yeah, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, I think there's a certain vulnerability
Yeah.
meets ego that you have to find again, like where's the honest place? So for me, like it took me 5 years to step in front of the camera. I wanted to, and I knew I needed to do the things I was doing. And I actually like I created courses where other people and they're all still integrated into all the work I do. But like God forbid I step in front. God forbid,
Yeah.
you know, I have a voice, because for me my creative work was like, well, I'm in the film, I'm all over those films. You don't physically see me, but oh, I'm in every frame of what I gaze and
Of
communicate and
course.
think. And but the vulnerability of like, well, we're talking, and then we're putting photos of ourselves, and we're so how old are you? I'm 52. How old are you?
45.
45. Yeah. So like, who are we, these like,
I know.
40, 50-year-old women, like out there and moving? And then also it's like, well, should you be only showing yourself in the sense of showing and sharing in a sense of, I'm showing this because I'm good for my age, as opposed to, this is just where I'm at, and this is me doing the thing of, this is me just showing you where I'm at, neither
It's
good
normalizing.
nor the bad. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think this is such important work, is that we are creating spaces for women to normalize sort of the transition into the second half of your life. One of the ways I always describe health, I have been saying this a lot the last couple of years, is that at the end of the day, it's about liking who you are
Hmm.
and what you do and why you do what you do.
And definitely, yeah.
Because I think so often, like we could easily build online businesses just to gratify ego, right? Or just to, I don't know, prove to the outside world that we're capable of creating something. And if we were really radically responsible for that truth, if that's why we created it, we wouldn't feel at peace. We would feel that inner discomfort. I call it integrity pain, right? But if I build a business, which I do feel this is the energy I've built my business with, because I genuinely think that women deserve a better conversation and a better arena for transformation. That feels so good,
It is
right?
good.
I
It's
feel at peace.
exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel at peace with that. So liking why I do what I do, that's where that comes from. Is it's because, I always use the analogy of I could go to lunch with a friend and she could order a salad. And if I ask her why she ordered the salad, if she tells me because she needs to lose 10 or 20 pounds to feel lovable, I know she doesn't like her reasons. Right? Like
Hmm.
that's not a feel good reason. That's like
Hmm.
if I don't change, I'm never going to have love in my life. Not great energy to create transformation with. But if she tells me I ordered a salad because I'm working really hard to eat more vegetables, because I am trying so hard to treat my body with more respect and give it what it needs,
Bon
that's awesome.
appetit. Bon appetit.
Right? And here's the real word. Like, this is what everyone needs to hear. I don't care who you work with as a coach or a trainer or a mentor. No one ever knows the truth of why you do what you do except you. So you could literally work with a trainer because you want to get stronger and more agile, or you want to lose weight, whatever it is, but it's coming from a place of self-loathing versus doing those things so you can actually step into the fullness of the rest of your life. I don't know why you're inspired to change, but you do.
Yeah. And it's that role of responsibility, I think, that is really uncomfortable for us at times. This
Oh
radical
yeah.
responsibility of just going, yeah, I enabled that. Yeah, I didn't do my bit. And like, yeah, I just chose to kind of say, sod it, or the ego driven stuff of just being
Yeah.
caught in the feel good, because,
Yeah.
and they're all just strategies. They're all just, people, um, limiting, like really self-limiting these stories that are like, well, you're allowed to be more. You know you can be more. Like, it's allowed.
Yeah.
Um, so tell me about some of the other things you do that people may not know about you, that just are that multi-passionate, that are this kind of, that when you have this resilience and health, you can be this Renaissance woman. You have,
Yeah.
all these skills. And so just tell me a little bit more about Courtney when
Yeah.
she's not on the podcast and coaching women.
I know. So, like I've said, movement has always been a big part of my life. I mean, I entered the world as a dancer. I was a very, very intense dancer for my early life. Um, and I always loved it. But I do think there was a point where it felt like I was maybe doing it for others more than I was doing it for myself. Because it kind of started to strip some of the pleasure and the joy of it started to strip away. And I think it was because I was trying to meet other people's expectations and try to fit into a box of what I was supposed to look like and perform like as a dancer, right? So I went through a big rumble with that. I turned to my career in training to sort of help maybe buffer that a little bit. Like I was still in the movement world, but I wasn't necessarily pursuing a professional dance career anymore. And I really enjoyed it, enjoyed helping people, enjoyed, kind of discovering strength training. Like as a dancer, strength training was not a big part of my training. So I broke into that and really loved it so much. And then one day I'm watching YouTube and I came across Ido Portal's work. And I just thought, I mean, my immediate response was so visceral. I was like, okay, this man, he gets it. He gets that we're not supposed to be boxed into these specific camps of isolation when it comes to movement. I'm not just a dancer. I'm also I lift weights. I lift heavy weights. And I like to hike and I like to ski and I like to do all these other things. Why do I have to label myself as a certain type of athlete? So I listened to him talk and, it was like a 3-minute video. And for whatever reason, at the end of that, I was really compelled to fly all the way to Singapore to work with the man for this like 3-week
Nice.
camp or whatever it
Uh-huh.
was. And and that was a big pivotal moment, I think, in my relationship back into movement, in that movement is, and Ido explains this beautifully, like he thinks of it as like a cloud. And some of us come in as dancers, and some of us come in as martial artists, and some of us come in as runners or swimmers. But once you're in the cloud, of movement, the hope is you start to see that you're never going to master it. It's so big. And your strength training helps to support your running, and your running helps to support your dancing, and your dancing helps you to be better at martial arts, right? Like it's all threaded together. So it becomes integration. And so the great thing about Ido is that when you train with him, you're pulling in elements of gymnastics and CrossFit and strength training and dance and martial arts. It's everything. And so it's like I felt like I was being nourished for the first time in a really long time.
I mean, that's a movement feast, which,
It's a
which,
movement feast.
yeah. And Ido's a really amazing researcher. Like he
Yeah.
does the work, and he became very well known after starting to train Conor McGregor.
Yeah.
And I did a workshop with him in Berlin. It was kind of prior to that, and
Yeah.
introduced him to Stefan Vigru, and then they trained together. And then then you started to see Ido like getting people to walk on railings and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And he was training with Joseph Bartz in Berlin, and but for years, Ido had been going around researching, traveling the world, finding different coaches, finding teachers, and being the generalist. Like, he came from
Yeah.
capoeira, but having this generalist approach of like, well, where can the gymnast meet the dancer, meet the strength coach, meet the hiker, meet the swimmer, all of those things. And I always say, our training doesn't exist in a vacuum.
Yeah.
And we all have a body, whether you like it, you don't like it.
Yeah.
We are these multisensory beings. And I was asking the question the other day of like, well, if you thought of movement as music, it's kind of like saying, well, you're only allowed to play one instrument. It's like, oh. And it's also like saying, well, well, everyone has to do piano. And then so some, it's like every kid at school had to do cross country. And it's like, that could be, I mean, I loathed cross country. I'm a fast twitch muscle person.
You and
I'm
me
like,
both. Anything endurance, I'm like, I'm out.
I actually, the year before COVID, I actually did the Couch to 10K project.
Yeah,
So
I think I remember that.
I can run for an hour. I don't do it very often. I haven't done it for a very long time now, actually. But like after an hour, I'm like, I'm good. I don't feel any desire to be running for more than an hour. But for other people, I have friends who are ultra runners.
Oh, yeah.
And like, they're not good unless they're going 60 to 100 miles. And like,
Yeah.
that feeds them, that nourishes them. Like and I'm not a body snatcher. I'm not a movement fascist. I'm not going to say, this is what you should do. And in the same way, if you try and make a kid play a piano, but really they just need an electric guitar or a set of drums, or they live in a landscape where, do you know what? The panpipes or the flute, these air sounds, these spacious sounds, like that's what resonates. Yet there's so much limited encouragement of dabble, mix it up, mess around, see what speaks to you. And as you say, like, own it all.
Yeah, and I love that analogy of like thinking of music as sort of like an orchestra, and everyone in that orchestra has to read music to play, right? And I think that's how I think of movement. It's the notes. It's everyone, there's coordination and agility and power and strength and mobility and all the things. And when you identify where your weakness is in that music, that's your work.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's interesting as athletes is we tend to work on the things that we're already good at.
Yeah, ego.
Right? Oh,
So
yeah.
much
I'll
ego.
never forget in a training with Ito. It was such a poignant moment. We were working on coordination, and I was getting so frustrated, because I'm a dancer.
Mm-hmm.
This should be easy for me.
This is your ballpark.
And he came over and he tapped me on the shoulder. He's like, hey, Courtney, if you aren't feeling uncoordinated right now, you're not working on coordination. Right? And I was like, that's brilliant.
The work is
He's
in the
so
wobble.
right.
The work is in the wobble.
The work is in the wobble. So if you're not wobbling, and this is the invitation, right? This is the invitation, is to start finding your wobble. Start working on the things that are your gaps, are keeping you from the life that you want to live. And absolutely, I think movement can be such a beautiful foundation for starting to tap into that work.
Yeah.
Because none of us are perfect movers. Like, you could take an Olympic athlete who is, a 10-time gold medalist in whatever they do, and you could find their gaps pretty quickly in movement.
Definitely. I mean, I can share. I know Ido's gap. Put him in the water.
Yeah.
Put him in the water.
Yeah.
Can't swim. Sorry, Ido. You may have gotten a bit better at it now. But when I trained with him in Berlin, he was only just beginning to learn how to swim.
Yeah.
And yet, like, that's my environment. Like, that's my like, I'm a water baby. I love the water. And so this idea, and I used to be really confused as a kid watching the Olympics, because my favorite thing was the decathlon. I was like, oh, this is someone who's good at all this stuff.
So many things.
Whereas it's like, oh, okay, that's the sprint, that's the long distance, that's the high jump, that's the throwing. But like, this person, they went and played all the games, and they're really good at all of them. Like, for me, that there was only really one Olympian, and that was the decathlete. It was, and I think there's too much of this specialization. But these movement stories, the movement experiences we have create, or they're stories we can't ignore because we experience them. And you can be like, la la la, monkey see, monkey, no, like, no, don't see it, don't hear it, don't do it, la 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 la, that's not me, da 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 da. But it is, and your body's experienced it, and it won't forget it. And at some point, it comes into your consciousness, and then you have to either meet it with a new story or be open to writing another story and perhaps correcting this past story. So In terms of like the women you work with and the things that you're most passionate about, what would you say to those story writing moments in terms of how to approach them,
Yeah.
how to meet with them?
Yeah. So I would say three things. I would say, first of all, you get to decide the colors you use to color your story. Okay. So what I mean by that is we say things like they're facts. Everything that I say, I declare it's like it's factual. So and so is a jerk. I'm not supposed to be a business owner because I suck at X, Y, and Z, right? We say it like it's a fact. Those aren't facts. All you did was you chose certain crayons to color that story with, right? And so I think remembering that neutral is always an option. So, for example, Sully lost his eyes. End of story. I don't have to color it at all. Sully lost his eyes. It's a fact of life. I don't have to make it a tragic thing. I don't have to make it an amazing thing. I can just say it's neutral. And I offer neutral because it's an easy gateway for a lot of people. It feels like, yeah, I could see that could be, that's true. That it's not a fact that this person is a jerk just because they worded an email in a certain way, or that my child is going to be like failing school because he got a bad grade on a math test, right? I can see where that I could just look at the facts. But the other two things that I love to offer people is that when you're looking for a new thought that just feels a little better, because remember, you can't lie to yourself. If you lie to yourself, it's not going to do you any good. So if you use the phrase, it is possible that, it is possible that my dog is going to figure this out. It is possible that I could learn to be awesome at business. Because it's not definitive. It's just saying it's a possibility. Of course it's a possibility. And the other phrase that I love to use a lot is just, I might be wrong that fill in the blank. I might be wrong that I'm just a dancer, or I might be wrong that this thing is going to happen, right? That I'm stressed out about. Because again, it just offers me some different thoughts. I might be wrong. That's a possibility. And then I get curious. And when I get curious, I'm more willing to kind of consider what's available to me.
And this is why I love listening to you. I mean, it's golden. It's really, really golden. And because the thoughts aren't always facts, the thoughts lead to the emotions drive actions, and actions create results. And we get, we roadblock ourselves at that first point. So these tools, and I love neutral. I really love this idea of neutral, and I'm always encouraging like the mid ground. Like,
Yeah,
let's stop the extremes. Like the mid ground is so cool. Can we just make, you know, neutral, mid ground? Can we make that like the go-to
totally.
place? And
The body's a
especially,
great place to practice neutral. I have a
mm,
body. It doesn't have to be amazing and it doesn't have to be horrible. I have a body that I get to do life in.
yeah, yeah, I love it. Um, what are you working on right now? And this is just at the moment the podcast is coming out, and I will update
Yeah.
links in the show notes. So, what are you working on now with people? What do you have going on?
Yeah. So about 3 years ago, I started a membership because I was working with one-to-one primarily. And I had this story in my head, Julie. It was a very strong story. There is no way that one-to-one work could translate to one-to-many. But I was out of time. I couldn't serve more people. My schedule was full. And a lot of coaches and people that I was consulting with had suggested, Courtney, it's probably time you move to more of a group environment, a membership environment. So anyway, all this to say, I did take that leap. And I was very quickly had to admit how wrong I was. Because what opened up was something I really couldn't have expected, which was, number one, I was creating this incubator to normalize these conversations. And they are conversations. It's not me just teaching. I do a lot of teaching inside the community, but it's me facilitating conversations. Where are you rumbling? Where are you rising? Where are the gaps? What are the thoughts that are driving this change, right? Just asking a lot of good questions all the time. And not only am I asking this to the women who are inside the community, but I'm asking them to answer it in front of a community.
Oh, that's vulnerable.
Yeah. So we get to practice leaning into discomfort. We get to practice being visible, owning our truth in a very safe environment. And initially, it's very normal for new members to come to a call and just kind of be like flies on the wall and just listen until they start hearing other women share and they start seeing how much value they're reaping from these conversations. And then they want to participate. So to see that, I created this to be able to serve more women. But what I didn't expect is that these women were going to start serving each other. So it really became this beautiful extension of coaching that wasn't just me at the helm.
So how can people find out more about you? Where are you? What's the best next step?
So I would say two things. I would say the Grace and Grit podcast, just subscribe to it on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts, because we're almost at our 300th episode. And it's just all things related to women's health and helping you to make the most out of your life. So we talk about really 4 camps of content: chemistry, strategy, mindset, and emotional agility. So how to be with emotion rather than trying to escape it all the time. So all of the episodes are kind of in those 4 buckets. But then the other thing that is just a free offer that might help you to navigate the podcast more easily if you're a new listener is you can go to graceandgrit.com/midlife magic, and we will send you a guide to 6 episodes that I've handpicked that are specifically talking about making the most of your second act. And it gives you, it's kind of like a journal. It's a journal and a guide. We give you some questions to answer after you've listened to the episodes. And I think those are just, they're great gateways to sort of staying in touch and getting to know the breadth of the work.
I love it. Thank you so much. And finally, what's next for you for the rest of the summer? What's happening?
Julie. So August is like, I went through this phase in my career where I panicked every August because people kind of check out because everybody's trying to get in the end of their summer. I used to take that personally. Like, nobody likes me anymore. What's happening? And then they would all come back in September. Well, now that I've seen a pattern for 20 years, I'm finally in a space where I'm like, okay, August is my time to breathe. So I will be in lots of rivers and lakes with my family. I will be hanging out with Sully and camping and doing just Montana things. Like, this is such a spectacular time of year to be here. I feel like it's why we live here, is for these few months. So I'm just going to be enjoying the heck out of myself and rejuvenating myself for all the goodness that's to come in the fall.
Amazing. Well, I mean, the landscapes there that I've seen, I've never been yet to Montana, but everything I've ever heard, it just speaks to me in terms of vast, stunning nature and mountains and rivers. So go and fill your cup. And I think it's really important that we walk the talk, that we can't just be like, oh yeah, take care of yourself and nourish. And well, how is she? Oh, she's really stressed out, coach. It's like, no.
Yes.
No. Go.
And I'm like you, I'm very transparent about why I even teach this work. It's because, of course, I want the conversation around women's health to be changing. But also, I think we learn and embed the work when we teach it. And so I always say, like, I'm rumbling right next to you, not ahead of you. I'm right next to you. Our rumbles look different. Our gaps are different, but we're still doing the work the same.
Yeah, I'll have clients who'll message back about a movement and say like, "Oh God, that one was really hard," and I'm like, "Oh yeah, I know, and I'm really shit at it." I'll say like, oh, "God, yeah, no, I fell over twice today," or because it's just life, and life is always changing, and the more we can adapt and change with it, and have these conversations and these spaces, and I think it's really beautiful the work you do and everything you share, and for there to be a visibility, whether it's through the voice or our images or our words or our writing. I think it is wonderful. So thank you so much for your time today. And
thank you for having me. And I'm so excited about this podcast.
I don't know where it's going to go, but I just start. It'll evolve. progress, not perfection. So just, and I don't have the affliction of being a perfectionist. I'm a really weird kind of like high performance slacker. Like I manage to achieve stuff and I look back and I go, oh, that's weird. Like that doesn't really sound.
No,
So
but I
I'm
remember you saying once to me that like I just don't do things I don't want to do. Like it's just like you really
yeah,
enjoy like you follow the thread of what kind of lights you up. And I think that that's just such a
yeah,
beautiful way to live. And it's I
yeah,
know there's things of course in your life that you like you pay your bills, you probably clean your house. Like nobody wants
I
to do those
do.
things necessarily. But you know, in terms of like a career path and your mission and message, it's so awesome you have followed the breadcrumbs because look at all you've done. I mean, it's just
Oh,
so
thank
fun.
you.
It's just such a great life.
I think I've just seen so many people who are like, the stressed out alcoholic lawyer who should have just been a poet.
I
And
know.
it's kind of like, okay, well, just I'd rather be the poet.
Yeah.
So I've always felt like, well, okay, so your career or your job, that's going to be something that you're going to spend you're going to spend a lot of your waking hours
Mhm.
doing this thing.
Yeah.
The world is vast and broad, and there are so many opportunities that why wouldn't you at least give it a go to do what speaks to you? Because life is going to be there's always going to be challenge. There's always going to be, I don't presume happiness. I don't presume contentment, but I'm very grateful when I have it, and then I'm just drawn to more of it. And I'm always very confused when people, whatever stories people heard, maybe I didn't hear them, maybe I wasn't listening, maybe I was daydreaming, and maybe I'm a little bit eccentric,
I
I don't
keep
know, or
daydreaming.
just a
Whatever
hedonist.
you're doing,
I'm
it's
just
working for you. I
well,
went to a
thank you.
conference in the fall and somebody had said, I thought it was so beautiful. They said, there's really only two people in your life you need to be worried about impressing your 8-year-old self and your 80-year-old self.
Oh,
And
I
I
love that.
thought, oh, yeah, it's so true. Like, and honestly, when I thought about like what would make my 8-year-old self happy and what would make my 80-year-old self happy, it was a lot of the same things,
Oh yeah, same.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
So,
definitely. And I've always been curious with the idea of like the reflections of end of life, of no one on their deathbed says, I wish I'd spent longer at the office. So it's kind of like, so okay, can we not learn from that?
right.
Like, is that not something rather important to listen to? Like that sounds like wisdom to me.
Yes.
And I think, going through kind of media and film school, that you deconstruct advertising messages, and so I'm not easily sold to. I'm You can't, because I see it. I see what it is. I see the process. I see. And so I'm just like, yeah, and it's powerful and it works. And sometimes I'm like, oh, that's really good. Oh
Mhm.
wow, like if I stayed and watched this kind of stuff all day, I'd probably want to buy that unnecessary device for the kitchen. But you know
Right.
what? I don't. So I don't want to. And like, this
No.
is nonsense, and or this is not my reference and my guide for my life.
I
Like
think
this
that's
is
so important, Julie, like what you just said, that, we have to take responsibility for the stories that are consciously and subconsciously impacting us,
yeah,
right? And that we take responsibility by making conscious choice about the spaces and places we hang out in, whether that's online, whether it's in your community, the people you spend time around. I mean, those stories are being embedded on us whether we are aware of it or not.
yeah,
And so I think that's a big piece of it for sure,
yeah.
which is
I'm
why I
I'm
love hanging out
very
with you.
oh, I mean, yeah, I'm very stubborn. I'm just like, no, I don't buy that. Nope.
Yeah.
Just like,
Yeah.
nope, not doing it. Not doing it. No. That's not my story.
Yeah.
Get that story away, because it's not mine. I'm writing my story. No one else gets to write my story.
No.
So stop being a body snatcher. Stop like being the story fascist. You don't, because I'm the only one who has to live it. Nobody else has to do it. I'm the only one who has to be me. So I think it's fair that I get to write what happens for the parts I do get to control.
Well, and
So I'm
please
just like,
do,
yeah,
because you write it so much better than anybody else ever could. I mean,
No,
that's the thing, right? When like people actually are willing to take risks and go after the things and write the book or start the podcast, or it's so much better than what anyone else would have ever planned for you. I mean,
it's
gosh,
all in, yeah.
I'd be in
Yeah,
business
yeah.
school, I think, if I did what my parents had probably destined me to do.
I have no idea. And this is probably so. I have actually no idea what my parents would have ever wanted for me.
Well, maybe they just always wanted you to be you.
Well, they were always really honest because they always said, Judy, we don't really understand what you do, but you seem to be very happy.
Yeah.
And I always said, I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
I have an older sister, and she's gone through like very different paths, like same upbringing, but very, very different paths. And hers works for her and mine works for me. And you know, the path, especially of the entrepreneur, and like, you know, you've been self-employed for 20 years. Like I tried having a job at 19 and I didn't like it. Just like this, I remember thinking like, really, this is what you have to sign up for adulthood? Nah. There's another way. There's always another way. There's always another way. It's not for me. It's not. And I love that other people, you know, it's for them and they thrive, but not always for me. So anyway, I'm going to let you go because I know our conversation, and I will have you back on again because there's always so much. So anyone listening,
well, I'll have you back too, probably before then. So,
well, thank you. So anyway, we're in our fangirl moment of appreciation. So if you're listening to this, follow Courtney, listen to her podcasts, do her courses, see what resonates, because there's always so much to learn. And also, you need to find the Instagram account of Sully. Because
Be Like Sully is his Instagram handle in case anyone needs it right now. Yeah. And I don't know if you can hear him, but if you hear snoring in the background, it's because he's right behind my desk and he is deep in a coma.
They rest so well. Strong resting.
Seriously.
So well. Well.
Bastard. Yeah.
Well, Pax is here. He's not actually snoring or legs running. No, he's just on the floor. On the floor, yeah. Very busy. Oh, so to all our fellow dog lovers and the cat lovers and the hamster lovers, thank you so much. And all the links will be in the show notes. So thank you, Courtney.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the show. Remember to subscribe and leave a review and let me know what resonated, what you liked, what it brought up, what you're curious about, and what you would like to hear. You can go to julieangel.com and you will find a bunch of great free resources there. There is the free Move More course, your free Movement Snacks guide. And if you are interested in reclaiming and increasing your physical strength and confidence so you can get your mojo back, be brave, adventurous, and age with grace, then message me via social media. I'm on Facebook and Instagram or through my website, or email me at drjulieangel@gmail.com. That's drjulieangel@gmail.com, and let's set up a call. And until the next time, enjoy, stay curious, and I'm glad you enjoyed the show.